And then if you need, if there's someone saying that they can't get in, just text me.
Yeah.
In case.
Now I gotta go here.
Has Paula joined? Can anybody see if Paula has joined?
What I'll show you. I don't know. It might not ask you because I'm the owner.
Gary.
Can you hear me, Beth?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can hear him talking quietly in the background.
Some people are
Yeah.
This is about it. Plus, can't.
I don't know. I'll text him.
What's going on?
What's the official there?
Oh.
Yeah.
I can tell my mom finished because it's down later. And you can always text me. I'll text my mom.
Yeah. Unique. 684.
Submit.
Yes. So that's what it's supposed to look like.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and.
I should shut the video off so I'm not distracted.
This is supposed to be starting right now. We're going to have maybe 5.
Yeah, my grandkids will FaceTime me, and it's hard to say no and not answer the phone,
So just text
but
me
it is kind of dangerous.
Someone else thinks it, yeah.
Yeah, because I am more easily distracted by the video than I thought.
Yeah,
So
just tell me
I think
something
I'm just gonna set my phone down and participate. that
Okay.
way. Yeah, I don't know what you're looking at. Something in my car.
Your lunch container and the trash on your seat.
Perfect.
Well,
Which way
you
the
would get a
camera
lot.
was.
You would get a lot messier video if you were looking in my truck. Gary. Gary. This is kind of unfair for the first participant.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's her on her end or our end.
Gary.
Hello? And then
Hey.
unmute you. Yeah. Oh, you're too close to mute it? Yeah.
All right. Hey, sorry, I was running a little bit late.
Well, we've now kind of cut our first participant's time down.
Hey, Beth. Beth.
Yeah.
So that I don't have to make apologies for everybody and stuff. I'm just gonna go in and out when I have to go in and out, rather than use up time explaining what I'm doing. Okay.
Okay. You're
So if
gonna
anybody
like
asks.
leave for physical therapy and then come back?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Who's second? Who's the second one?
Mark Curtis, then Matt Kasel, and then Jason Kolkma.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Mark Curtis has actually done some landlord-tenant stuff, so he'll probably have.
Gotcha. Gary.
All right. So, yeah, the process will just let them know, hey, we've got 7 questions for you. If you spend 2 or 3 minutes on each question,
Right, but
you'll fill up most of the time, and then we'll have Q&As.
Well, but our
so we can just.
Gary, our first person is now 10 minutes down, though. Is she trying to join? Have you seen her?
No one else has tried to join.
It would be Paula Mathis. I sent her.
There's a Paula Baker already in.
Yeah, that's her.
Okay, so if you want to start the questions, it's already recording.
Where are you?
I'm driving back to my place so I can pay attention, but I'll be here the whole time.
Okay. So I have two people driving. And Shirley, did you just join? I thought I saw Shirley joined. Very sorry, Paula. I'm Beth.
Hi, Beth.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Nice,
Um,
nice to finally see your face.
yeah, I know I've seen you around. So David is driving to physical therapy, and Gary is driving home from the office, which is only a few blocks away. I don't know. I can't tell. Stephen, are you here? No. Jeremy Garcia. Oh, maybe Stephen is here.
Yeah, I'm here.
You are here. Okay. Paula, we apologize. There was some sort of glitch. But do you have the questions? Hi, Jeremy. Do you have the questions, Paula, in front of you?
I do, off to the side here. I do.
Okay. So the very first question I know is really a kind of a big, broad question, important as far as equality under the law. Is that how it's worded?
The first question lists why do you want to be a judge?
Oh, okay. Go with that one.
Okay. Becoming a judge was one of those dreams that I had probably middle of my career. And I ran for judge 4 years ago with the idea that I was hoping that we would be able to continue the sobriety court program as I had been a member of it as a prosecutor as well as a defense attorney. I have practiced in district courts for all of my career. I started out in legal services in northern Michigan doing eviction defense, but I've also done landlord stuff here in Muskegon when I've been in private practice. But I've also done criminal and civil work in that court, and I thought that my experience on both sides of the courtroom gave me a really good experience to be fair and impartial to both sides.
Good.
Thanks.
I don't exactly know how Gary wants me to be doing this. So sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. What is the second question?
That's the equality under the law. What does it mean to me? And equality under the law to me means that everybody is treated the same, that if you follow the rules, then the rules get to be enforced for you. Or if you don't follow the rules, they don't get to be enforced for you. And I am very aware that district court is a court of law rather than equity, and that district court is not a court of equity with respect to landlord-tenant cases.
Okay. That sounds good.
Thanks.
I don't know. Am I supposed to be doing thumbs up or 5
I don't know.
stars?
It kind of incorporates that. How does it apply to landlord-tenant law? Equality under the law, I think, like I said, if you're following the rules, then the law will work out for you. If you don't follow the rules, then it won't. But your landlord-tenant, in my experience, is pretty straightforward with very little room for emotion.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I'm counting on you for these because I would be looking on my iPad, but I'm actually on my iPad on the meeting, so I can't do that.
Sure. The next question lists what experiences I've had with landlord-tenant law. As I mentioned before, I worked for Legal Services of Northern Michigan doing eviction defense, and I did that with private landlords as well as with federally funded landlords and Section 8 recipients as well. And I spent 4 years doing that up in the UP. And then in private practice, I handled a number of cases for landlords in the Muskegon and Holland area.
Oh, okay. Okay. You mean there are people that rent up in the UP?
Yes, there are.
Probably nothing like Muskegon County, though.
We didn't have the the projects or the apartment buildings that that Muskegon County has. So there were mostly private landlords and a few places that accepted Section 8. But it was, I represented people in 3 different counties up there.
Okay. Okay. What is the next question?
The next one is, what is the eviction process? And I feel like that's a trick question. You guys all know this. So it's like you're trying to catch me and see if I know what I'm talking about.
Well, I didn't write the questions. I just kind of have I'm in this spot right now. So I didn't write them. So don't look at me.
I'm not blaming you. You know, I know that the eviction process depends on what type of eviction is going on. If it's the end of the lease and somebody stays after the lease, there's a specific notice for that, for termination of tenancy. And to start there are the summary proceedings that can be held. If somebody hasn't paid rent, that can start the summary proceedings. And if it's a violation of the lease, that can trigger an eviction as well. I know each one of those has a different time period for how much notice is required to give to the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that time period expires, then that starts the court proceeding paperwork. And then we trigger the court process and how long it takes you to get into court. So I know that it can be longer for certain evictions than others, but it all depends on the notice and the type of eviction that's going on.
True. That is
And I do understand that the eviction process is quite a drag on landlords' time and energy. And I would definitely want to make sure that we are preventing any unnecessary delays.
I think especially right now because of the pandemic, the quarantine, the shutdown and everything, I think that landlords are probably an overlooked spot, a group of people that are, hurting and I think that all the people listening to me would agree, even though I can't see their faces. And, it's a shame because people are rallying for no evictions. And yet, what about the landlords?
Right.
Who need paid?
Yeah.
So that
they have to pay those bills too.
Right. I think that would bring us to one of the next questions would talk about what would your opinion be regarding late fees, the charging of late fees. I think the question is a little wordier than that. I think I might have simplified it just now.
Yeah, there's 2 questions on there. Could you read the question in full and then describe your answer to that?
Sure. The first one is listed as recently many tenants have been filing motions that do not comply with Michigan court rules, including timeframes to file. Some judges have allowed those motions to go to hearings, at which time the landlord always wins due to these violations of the MCR. This effectively gives free rent to tenants abusing the legal system. What do you think should be done about this? Well,
nothing loaded in that question, huh,
yeah,
Paula?
I'm not really sure.
This was 2 minutes to preach to the candidate.
That is, that's definitely a loaded question. I don't know specifically about the types of motions that are getting filed by these tenants. I know that motions are supposed to comply with the court rules or they don't get heard. And right now I mostly practice felony work in circuit court, and I know the judges do make exceptions for people who are representing themselves, but I'm not sure that that's proper, that accepting motions that don't comply with the timeframes is proper unless there's good cause shown. I'm not sure I can give a really solid answer about what I think should be done about this. I can tell you my experience has been that that this landlord tenant law is pretty straightforward, and there aren't many defenses or defensive motions that can be filed. And if somebody is violating the rules to get free rent, then I think that the loss of rent is something that needs to be addressed in the costs associated with the case.
Paula, I want to kind of maybe kind of reword that question a little bit. You spent quite a bit of time in district court in front of the judges. And as you looked at the judges from a perspective of temperament, and then who followed the law and who do you think carved out exceptions or tried to be equitable? You mentioned equity versus following the law. Out of the judges that you were in front of, who did you view as following the law, and who did you view as those who carved out the the exceptions or the equity?
Well, I think that right now the eviction prevention program is an attempt to impose some equitable considerations into district courts.
Yeah, but let's take it outside of landlord tenant, just from a judicial temperament, from an application of the law, because you didn't do a lot of landlord tenant stuff in the district court. Not that you didn't, but from a judicial temperament, who followed the law and who for good reasons or bad, whatever it was. I mean, there are judges, if you had a criminal case you wanted to be in front of because you had a more sympathetic, and there were judges you felt, from that standpoint. So who, as you viewed the judges, do you view, and then who do you think you would follow out of those judges? Okay. What temperament would you exhibit?
Well, I think my experience has been that most of the district court judges do follow the law with respect to the criminal stuff that I practice in. I may question why they didn't follow some other aspect of the law, but I think for the most part they do. With respect to temperament about following the law and not following the law, I guess I'm struggling with that, because they do all follow it because they have a lot of judicial discretion. And maybe that's where you're trying to get me to go, is who's exercising a bit more discretion about other things. And, I can honestly say I haven't practiced much in front of Judge Nolan since he's been on the bench. I've been there a few times. I would expect that my temperament would be probably in between some version of Judge Kostrava and Judge Lattice Hoops, excuse me.
Okay.
Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it kind of, without getting into too much detail and without, yes, that kind of, because I mean, the judge you were. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I like the question, or the phrasing of the question of which judge would you say aligns closest with your temperament or style, although you picked the two judges that are farthest apart.
Great point, Gary.
Yeah.
Well, in fairness,
without the erraticness of the judge that's being replaced, you would be replacing.
I really don't want to align myself with the judge that I really enjoy practicing in front of, but he's, as I described to some of my young associates, he's a bit of a curmudgeon.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm a curmudgeon.
And our concern as an organization, we do a lot of landlord training. We try and make sure that we're professional landlords. We know there are slumlords that exist in Muskegon, and that you do have the judicial discretion, especially when someone's representing themselves, which happens often in landlord-tenant cases. Our big concern is that when the laws aren't applied fairly on one side versus the other, as in all the exceptions go one way versus the other way, it becomes, the eviction process becomes a really big burden for the landlord. None of us have a problem with following the rules, with making sure everything's been filed correctly and that we're getting them the notification. In fact, all of us would prefer that the eviction process ends in them paying the money and staying. We would rather have them stay. But
Well, almost all the time.
Almost always, unless they're causing damage to the property or something. But especially, there's been several, we're not going to get into names, but there have been judges that are not interested in applying the law. They're interested in working on this person's problem. And that's where we have a problem with judges, and was when someone's, if you'll just apply the law, we will 100% love you and and we will follow the law and do everything. And there's certain rules that we have to abide by, and that's what allows us to run our business, is knowing what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
When the eviction process becomes basically a lottery system,
Right.
That's our concern.
I understand that. Let me tell you my background. I've been doing criminal defense work for a few years now, and there are times where I want to fix my client, and we've enacted and put into place a more holistic defense program in the public defender's office that includes a social worker in our office who helps our clients navigate certain aspects of the system. But I recognize that the court system, especially landlord-tenant cases, is not where you fix the problems. That is a more holistic issue for the clients that I have right now, and for tenants in the court system. I don't think that I would be trying to fix them through the court process. I very often have to be the bearer of very bad news in my job, and have to explain to my clients that they are looking at a long-term in prison, or being on the sex offender registry, or some other very nasty consequence of their actions. And so I don't have a difficulty telling that to individuals, and some people, I know that some people do. They don't want to be that bearer of bad news, but I've been doing it for quite a few years now, and have gotten pretty good at telling people that there is no fixing what they have created, the problem they have created, if that kind of answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
It does.
You're welcome.
Gary, I think that, we are kind of like, now we're running over. Well, not quite yet. We will soon. But it is Paula's husband's birthday too. So that's why we put you first, Paula.
Thank you.
I will say that I believe correct me if I'm wrong, but the primary in August, then 2 of the 4 candidates go forward to November. Is that correct?
Yes, the top 2 vote getters.
Okay. So I think, am I right in this, Gary, that sometime between August and the November vote, then we will have the top 2 vote getters come, because hopefully we'll be able to have a real meeting by that time. I think today would have been a nice time to have a real meeting, but it didn't happen. So is that right, Gary?
Yeah, I would love to have them come in, talk to us, and instead of firing questions at them, maybe, hear our concerns from our point of view,
Right.
and get to know us as a group. Because while not every landlord is a member of the MARA, the members of the MARA, I feel, are some of the better landlords in the area, and I would like the judges to know who we are and what we're trying to do.
Right.
I would enjoy that.
And also, you probably haven't been in front of very many people in your campaign, have you?
No, we have not been out with many people at all.
That is so sad.
It is.
Such a hard way to run a campaign.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that I don't envy you at all. Uphill battle right there.
It's challenging.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to talking to you again. And we may, I mean, Gary, we don't know. We may be able to do something even before the August primary. And if we are able to, I have all your contact information, and I can get your phone number easily from Carol Fisher.
Sure.
So.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and letting me be done first so I can go celebrate.
Are you going to go to a real restaurant?
I doubt it very much.
Oh, I miss restaurants.
I know. But
Oh, boy.
you'll enjoy it with the family.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. How far away are you, Gary? Where are you driving from? I can't hear you.
I said I was driving from Grand Haven. I just passed Sternberg, so I'll be home in like 2 minutes. I can see if someone else has joined and have them added. I've got someone manning the computer right now.
Mark Curtis is the next one.
Okay,
So that's
and
who you'd be
do you know if
looking
he's
for.
there yet?
I have no way of seeing, do I?
All right, I'll go ahead and see if I can. I'll check. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Anybody else here, or am I in a room all by myself?
I'm here. I'm listening.
Oh, are you? Okay. What you thinking?
Jeremy's on. It looks like Jeremy's on here too. I think it's just me, you, and Jeremy.
I thought I saw Shirley, but looks like everybody. Shirley's here. Jeremy and Shirley have their microphones off. Oh, there
Yeah,
you
she's
are.
here. So
Gotcha. Are you the one, Jeremy, letting people in? Or no?
I'll try and figure that out.
Well, Gary said that he had somebody that was letting people in. So
I'm
there we go.
guessing it's somebody else. Yeah,
Okay.
there we go.
Are you there, Mark? You're not Mark.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, hi, Mark. Whoops.
Hi.
Sorry about that.
There we go. Okay.
Are your lips lining up with your words?
They are for you. I don't know if I can't see myself. I don't know where the heck it's at.
Okay, now they are. For a moment, they weren't.
Okay.
And it was kind of like a bad, kung fu movie from 40 years ago. But now it looks good. Now I can see. Yeah, don't do that. That won't be good. So, hi. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, we have had a few little glitches. Gary is in the car. And so even though he's the president, he has sadly asked me to ask the questions and such, and we do have people that are coming in and out as their responsibilities call for that. So we'll start with the first question. Can everybody
So hold on a second. So what the format is, we're going to ask you these 7 questions. It's the same questions we're asking everyone. You can spend 2 to 3 minutes going over each question, expound on it as much as you'd like. But when we're done, that gives us an extra 5-10 minutes to be able to do kind of a Q&A. You can ask us anything. We can ask you anything. So just want to give you, the format of how we're handling this.
That's,
Okay, perfect.
That's Gary. He's the real boss. So let's do what he says. So go ahead. You have the questions in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You can start with the first one.
Okay, so why do I want to be a judge? That is always the $1 million question that everybody wants to know.
Right.
The reason why is because it started when I was in the military. I was a military police officer in the U.S. Army deployed to Iraq, and learned very early on that public service is something that's important to me. And protecting people's rights is another one. And all through that experience, I had decided that I wanted to get out and pursue law. And that's when I got out and went to law school and decided to become a prosecuting attorney, which led me here to Muskegon County. Very happy for the opportunity. Love the community. We chose to move here, and chose to stay here. This isn't something that I've chosen to leave or come back. I've chosen to stay here in Muskegon County. But the real reason why I want to be the district court judge is I think it's important to notice there's a difference between the judges. There's a difference between district court. There's a difference between circuit court. There's a difference between probate court. I want to be a district court judge for the fact that district court is where you can make the most impact on your community. It is the spot where you see everybody in their either first time offenders coming in or their daily lives of what's happening. Just as your organization, landlord tenants. That's something that's affecting not just the landlords, but the tenants and everybody in our community. That's community based. That's something you can look at in the district court and a district court judge is because I believe that a district court judge has more impact on what's happening in the community, has a better chance of helping those individuals in the community on an everyday basis than somebody who's sitting up in a circuit court bench.
Good. I told them before, Paula, I don't know if I'm supposed to do 2 thumbs up, 5 stars. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in between questions, Gary. So why don't we you do it now, Gary, you're home.
All right. So the next
Shirley.
question, after why do you want to be a judge is, what does equality under the law mean to you?
And the bench is for the people. It's not for the judge who's sitting up there. It's for the litigants that come in. It's for the criminals. It's for the prosecution. It's for the defense. The judge is supposed to be a neutral party and listen to what takes place. And your organization, as far as landlords and tenants, it's to determine whether or not that individual hasn't been abiding by their terms of the contract and whether or not they need to be evicted from the property. At the same time, you have to listen to what the tenants have to say. Does that mean that you are all on one side or one on the other? No, it's about equality between the tenants or between the litigants that are appearing before you, and to apply the law, not my personal feelings, not what I believe is right and wrong, but to apply what the law states is supposed to happen in the courtroom at the point in time between what's going on. Equity between the law to me isn't legislating from the bench. It's following the laws and making sure that everyone is treated fairly before the bench at that point in time.
All right, then the next question, I'm pulling up my computer right now, but I believe the next question is, how does that relate to landlord tenant? Which I believe you touched on. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I did touch on it, and I think it kind of speaks to it. I think I've spoken to what that question answers.
Okay. And then I believe the next question is, what is your experience with landlord-tenant cases?
I have handled some in private practice. I have handled some landlord-tenant cases. I will tell you, and that it is one of those things it's a very emotional time because the landlords want their rent and they want their property and they want to be paid for what they're doing, and the tenants at the same time have a reason why they believe they shouldn't pay it. However, they don't believe landlord tenant is very statute driven. There's certain requirements that must be met, and it must be followed and must be done. And as long as those are being done and followed, then there isn't much for a judge to say or do, except for to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and everybody's being taken care of and everybody's being treated fairly. It's not my job to stand up and say, hey, look at tenant, you know, if you haven't paid your rent, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, look at, you got another 80 to 90 to 120 days to figure out where you're going to go live. If the landlord has done what they're supposed to do, then there isn't much room for me to say what should or shouldn't happen.
Excuse me, just 1 second, Gary. There is something wrong with the connection, like it's bouncing. Is it just me or does anybody else?
I'm getting the same thing on this end. It's
okay. It's kind of like the thing that makes you feel like you're getting whiplash.
Everybody just froze up for a second.
Okay, now it feels.
Everything's like bouncing and yeah.
Right. Feels a little better right now. I think we might be fixed.
I think it was, but I wasn't on mute.
To be more specific, I've handled some land contract forfeiture cases in regards to following the statutes and having the people forfeited because of that. As far as the actual landlord-tenant experience, I've covered a few hearings, but I've never gotten involved in filing the paperwork and doing the actual eviction process the whole way through. But I've covered hearings for people and went and met and did the consent and have been there and watched what has happened and what has occurred. But I haven't ever, except for land contract forfeiture, I haven't done too much landlord-tenant actual evictions.
All right, so while you haven't done them, what is your understanding of the eviction process?
Well, my understanding of the eviction process is even though I haven't done them, I was in an office that did a lot of them, is that as the landlord, if they have rent and they're past due, that you then have to serve them with the demand of possession. And depending on which one it is, it's either 7 or 30 days. Usually it's 7 because it's for non-payment of rent. The tenant then has 7 days to either vacate the property and or pay up the rent that is owed. If that's done, the landlord has to follow the statutory requirements and bring everything down and file a summons and complaint. The court then has to give you a hearing date within 10 days from you filing that paperwork. If in that 10 days of that hearing date, then it gets served. And then if you show up and then everybody shows up for that hearing date, and if the landlord done what they're supposed to do and all the paperwork's crossed and all the I's are dotted and all the, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and the tenant doesn't have a legitimate reason for why they haven't paid the rent and they don't have a defense as listed under the statutes, well, then you win and the landlords then win. They get their judgment, they get their demand for possession, and then the tenant has to move out.
If only it were that easy.
I know. I can tell you I've sat in the courtroom and I've watched landlord tenants and it's just like, wait a second. It's supposed to be that simple, but yet here it is now. We're knocking it back another 45, another 90.
Right. You
guys go work it out and figure out what's going to happen. Oh, they say they're going to pay you. You worked out a consent judgment and then they don't do what they're supposed to do during that point in time. I understand your frustration from sitting there and watching the hearings that are taking place in that courthouse.
Gotcha.
So that kind of brings us to the next question, which I don't know if you've seen the theme, is all we're asking is that you treat us fairly. But recently, many tenants have been filing motions that do not comply with Michigan court rules, including the time frames required to file. Some judges have allowed those motions to go to hearings anyway, at which point the landlord always wins due to the violations of the MCR. This effectively gives the free rent to tenants abusing the legal system. What do you think should be done about this?
Well, you mind if I ask a question first? Is once the tenants file their improper motion under the Michigan court rules, because I know as an attorney, I have the ability to then file a motion to be heard without a hearing and ask the judge to make a ruling at that point in time, which is, they didn't comply. They're in default. Their motion is frivolous. I want you to strike it and make a ruling. Is that something that you guys have pursued?
Yes. Is David still on?
Okay.
No, David had.
Okay. David's
he'll be
not on,
back.
who's the attorney we typically use, but yes, I've actually had that done with 2 lawyers, and both times the response was, we'll hear that at the hearing. It's a pretty common practice. Like I said, there's certain motions, you've got 10 days to file them. They're filed 15 days, 20 days later, and then you're supposed to, according to the MCR, be heard within 15 days, and the court date is set for 20 days later. And then we win every single time because we win. And that's not even going into the reasonings for the motions, which weren't valid in the first place, but we're not going there. I'm just talking about the MCR rules of how the court process is supposed to flow. What do you think should happen when landlord or tenant, what do you think should happen when someone files a motion that does not comply with MCR rules?
Well, I'll tell you that I believe that when a person comes before court, if you're going to come in and you're going to play ball in the court, you better know the rules. And if you can't play by the rules, then you don't get an extra bat or you don't get an extra swing. Lawyers are held to very high standards as far as it comes to timelines and timeframes and when stuff has to be filed and when it's not filed. And if we don't file stuff when we're supposed to, it doesn't fly. You don't then get to come in and say, hey, I'm sorry, I wanted to be able to do this, but I didn't do it until this day. I believe, like I've said, the law is the law. It's not my job to legislate from the bench. It's not my job to tell you that what you're doing isn't right or isn't wrong or whatever. If you're following the guidelines and you're doing what's right and they filed and it's beyond the timelines, well, then their motions don't get heard. They can, file, it'll be denied. They can file a motion for reconsideration. They can go to circuit court. They can do whatever they want. But if you haven't followed the timelines, listen, as an attorney, I've gotten stuck with that. You miss a deadline and you're stuck. And if you're a litigant in the court and you haven't followed the timelines, I don't care if you're not represented or not in court. It's not my job to help you through the process. You should know the process when you get there. There are so many resources available for tenants to be able to go and talk to people, to look stuff up, to figure out how to do what they're supposed to do. That coming in and saying, oh, I didn't know, doesn't work. It doesn't work for an attorney. It's not going to work for you. It shouldn't work for anybody else.
All right, which brings us to the next question. Late fees are a common practice both in business and in government. Government often charges late fees, including the court, in order to recoup the costs of collecting past due bills, not as a punishment. They are legal in the state of Michigan, and every neighboring court allows them, but there have been judges in the past who would remove all late fees from money judgments or even possession judgments. Do you think that's an appropriate application of the law? And what will you be doing with late fees when they come into your court? Because they're going to show up.
Yeah, I can't answer that question for you right now. Because I haven't been presented with that situation. And to tell you the truth a little bit, I understand if the late fees you're talking about is like, it says, hey, look, you had to pay your rent within 5 days. If it's past the 5 days, then you owe an additional $35. Is that the kind of fee you're talking about?
Yes, I'm not asking you to commit to allowing someone to punish and do crazy fees, because there are rules. It can't be punitive. It can't continually grow. It's got to be just for recovering the costs that you actually have for collecting a past due late. But if the question is, what will you be looking for late fees? How will you be handling late fees? Because that is a kind of a sore spot with us at the moment.
Well, I truly can't answer that question because I don't know. Because it would have to be looking at exactly what you're deeming as a late fee and collection cost. Because when you say that, I hear two different things: is collection cost and trying to collect, and that being late fees. I think you're allowed to add to a money judgment what it took you to try to collect and the interest that goes along with it. As far as late fees, like you didn't pay the rent, so I'm going to keep hitting you with a late fee every month, even if they still owe you a money judgment. I think that's a little, if it's cost of collection and it's cost of going to court and it's interest on trying to collect a judgment, then I believe that that's appropriate.
Those are 7 questions, so I'm going to open up to the rest of the board, a little bit of Q&A. And if you've got questions for us, you can also ask us questions.
I'll ask.
Okay, thank you.
Can you word that what David asked Paula, since David had to go to physical therapy? He asked, given the 4 judges that are on the bench right now in district court, where would you line up in judicial temperament? I think I worded that right.
I love the word judicial temperament, because nobody that's on the bench can tell you yet what your temperament's what their temperament necessarily is going to be when they get up there. If you're asking who I more align with, I think I bring a unique perspective to what's going on the bench. I don't say I align with. I like some of what Judge Kostrava does. I like some of what Judge Nolan does. I like some of what Judge Hoops does, and I like some of what Judge Close does. I think if you're asking who I most closely align with, I don't think I can give you an answer to who I align with. It's funny because you get that question. It's like, okay, well, who's your favorite Supreme Court justice? Well, I don't know, because some of them make good decisions and some of them make bad decisions. As a personal, who do you more align with at that point in time? I believe that a court is the judge who's on the bench is the one who runs the courtroom that he's in, and he's the one who makes the decisions. It's what's happening in there. And when you try to mimic or do what somebody else is doing, then you're really not holding true to who and why the people elected you to be judge. When you say I'm going to be like Judge Kostrava, well then that's Judge Kostrava. That's not Judge Curtis, and I think that makes a difference.
Do you have a question, Shirley?
Yes, I do. First of all, I want to thank you for serving in the armed forces, for being a veteran. And then I was wondering, you had mentioned that you would protect the people's rights. Do you think your background, if it was negative, would influence the renters or the tenants?
I'm sorry, I kind of lost the end of your question. It was whether it would influence.
You had mentioned that you would protect the people's rights, had said earlier, like you did in the service and as a police officer and stuff. Do you think that would be a positive aspect? Because, we're all people, the renters and the landlords. And
Well, yeah, I mean, it is, because when I mean the people of Muskegon County. It doesn't mean one class or one gender or one group. It doesn't mean I'm there to protect the landlords. It doesn't mean I'm there to protect the tenants. My job is to protect the Constitution of the United States and to make sure that everyone is treated fairly and equally that comes before the court.
So you would stick by the law and not the people, as far as you go by the law and not get your emotions involved in it. Okay, thank you.
Correct. If the law is
I think, our big theme for us is we are, as a group, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, the Muskegon Area Rental Association. We know there are slumlords out there, and there are people who are not fulfilling their obligations of their landlord-tenant law. We believe that everyone in our group is fulfilling those obligations, but because of past bad actors from the bench, the law has not been upheld on the tenant side in our estimation. We are not asking for favorable treatment, but we want to make sure that someone will just apply the law fairly. We're not going to self-help evict. We are going to maintain our properties in habitable condition. But if someone doesn't pay their rent, we have to be able to go through the process in a timely manner. Otherwise, we have to raise rents across the board, which hurts everyone, and it causes a lot of consternation on our end. So we want to make sure We want you to speak to your ability to understand. Everyone has a reason on why they broke the law. The landlord does, and the tenant does. We don't care if the landlord broke the law. We want him slammed. But if the tenant broke the law, we want them slammed. We just want someone who will apply the law, because that allows us to run our business if we know what to expect next.
If let me speak to that, is the fact that, and I'm going to use my criminal background a little bit to show you who I am and where I come from, is that I was a prosecuting attorney for 10 years. For 10 years, I prosecuted criminals. Law enforcement I was on the side of law enforcement. And I held law enforcement to a very high standard. When I was a prosecuting attorney, I didn't charge cases or go to trial unless they had done what they needed to do and we were ready to go. Now I'm on the defense side. Now I'm those that I held to a high standard that are now sitting on the stand, that I'm questioning them and questioning them on their jobs and whether they did their jobs right. Is one of the officers told me when I was making the transition, he said, look, you held us to a standard when you were a prosecutor. Hold us to that same standard as a defense attorney. Don't change what you're doing because all of a sudden now you're on the defense side. If I didn't do my job right, then you need to tell me that I didn't do my job right, because I'm going to learn for it. Whether you're prosecutor or defense attorney, you're going to do it. And I think that kind of applies across the board. If you didn't do as a landlord what you're supposed to be doing, I'm going to tell you, and you need to go fix it. If you're a tenant and you didn't do what you're supposed to, I'm going to tell you, and you need to fix it. It doesn't matter to me which side of the ball you're on, as long as you did what you're supposed to do, or if you didn't do what you were supposed to do, I'm going to tell you. And we're going to apply the law in the way that it's supposed to be applied, and by your actions and by what you've done, not where you're coming from, what class you're coming from, who's the landlord, who's the tenant, who's doing whatever. There are slumlords out there. They're the ones who aren't doing their jobs right. They're going to get told by me that they're not doing their jobs right. I'm not going to give them a break. There are tenants out there who don't do what they're supposed to. If they haven't paid their rent and they're not making an effort with you to pay their rent, and they don't have a valid defense to it, well, then there's not much I can do. The law is the law, and it needs to be applied equally to everybody, no matter where you're coming from.
I think what Gary had asked Paula is, it was good wording, and I'll finish up with this because I think we're close to being done. But Gary asked, the problem that landlords often see is that judges use that time on the bench to try to fix a tenant's life and fix a tenant's problem. And I think that that's what Gary was saying in a lot loftier words. Is that right, Gary?
Yes. I mean, if you use the time on the bench to fix someone's life or problems instead of fixing the legal issue, and that's where you might be helping someone, but it wouldn't be treating both landlord and tenant equally under the law. We just want to be treated equally.
Well, and I think you can look at my slogan, is that it's passion for justice and compassion for people. Is that I have a passion for the law. I like to see the law applied fairly and equally to everyone, but you still have to have a little compassion for what's going on in a person's life. Does that excuse their behavior? Does that excuse them missing a timeline? No. Does that mean that because you missed a timeline and you have a great excuse as to why it happened, or that somebody was doing whatever? You have to look at the circumstances, but I can tell you now, not having the experience that you guys have had, being in court and not being able to speak what the other judges are doing, because like I said, every courtroom's an individual courtroom, is you have to look at what's going on as far as, has the law been followed? That's the number one question. If the law is being followed, then discretion comes in. If the law is not being followed, then there isn't any discretion, because you didn't follow the procedures of what need to be done. You didn't pay your rent. If you didn't pay your rent, because I imagine, as you guys are landlords, it's not as if, oh wait, you missed one payment in 1 month and now I'm going to haul you in. You've been a great tenant up until this point. You've been a tenant for a year, and all of a sudden now on month 12, you missed a rent payment that you're running in and filing with them right off the bat. It's let's see how we can work together and work something out. It's not like all of a sudden, boom, you're out. And if that's what's happening, then that needs to be looked at. But no, I don't see where, oh wait, you gave me a really good excuse, I'm going to bump you out 180 days and you try to figure something out with the landlord. That's not fair to the landlord at that point.
Right.
Okay, we appreciate your time. I know that there's a process where the 4 of you will get whittled down to 2 of you, and I believe we're going to try and get the final 2 back in front of us at some point. So hopefully we'll talk to you again.
In a real
Okay,
meeting.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
in a real face-to-face meeting, right?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Okay.
With handshakes and hand sanitizer.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And then I've got a Matthew Parcel trying to join.
Hazel.
Hazel?
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Hey, Matt.
Can everybody see me?
Oh, yeah. Now we can.
Okay, good. I've never used Google before. I've done the Zoom and the Microsoft Teams, so this is the first time for me. So.
Hi.
It's the only one that I've got the ability to record on.
Oh, yeah. No, that's fine.
So the process we're going through is we've got 7 questions. We want to roll through them, expound on them as much as you want. You've got about 2 to 3 minutes per question that you can talk about your philosophy on the issues. That'll give us enough time at the end that we can ask some off-the-cuff questions. And if you have any questions for us, we'd love to hear them as well.
Great.
So let's get started with the easiest one. Why do you want to be a judge?
I got to tell you, probably about a year ago, if someone had asked me, do you want to be a judge? I think my answer would have been no. I really enjoy private practice. I have a pretty thriving business, which I really enjoy. I like interacting with clients, which are people, real people. And as we got closer to the winter, and it became apparent to me, I've always been frustrated with the status quo in Muskegon. I've been here for over a decade, and nothing really seems to change in district court in terms of its processes and procedures. There's a lot of lawyers that complain about it, and we sort of kind of hope that someone listens to us, but there's no real listening. So when I started seeing some of the candidates, at least at the time, sounded like they were going to come forward, I didn't have real confidence that any of these individuals would want to kind of change the status quo in Muskegon. And what I mean by that is I ran a business, a small business. Many of you guys run small businesses. That's what this is. We have to work very, very hard for our money. We have to work very hard for what we get. We basically got to, kill what we eat kind of thing. And I think that the district court can be ran more like a business. And that is, we work hard. We don't do 9 to 3 or 9:30 to 3 or 10 to 3 or whatever it may be. We work hard. So my idea is simply saying, look, if these candidates I don't believe are going to do that, then I think maybe I should think about doing it. And I think I can bring a lot to the job in terms of, look, you need to, in my mind, we need to take a more business-like approach with the district court and change things. And the second thing is also, I really get really frustrated when a judge gets into office. They seem to sort of disappear behind this, this cloak of judicialship, and I don't know why that we can't reach out to attorneys, reach out to you guys, reach out to other groups to say, okay, listen, how can we make this better? It seems as soon as they get appointed or they get elected, they're just gone, and there's no real interaction with the community, and that's for a lot of different issues. It's how to make the district court better, but also a lot of issues that people are facing out in the community. And I don't understand why it's expected of some representatives to do that, but not to the judiciary. We're supposed to remain neutral when it comes to law. I don't see why the judge, who is an employee of the people, who's elected by the people, whose salary is paid by the people, should not feel like they can sit and talk to people and make things different. So really, I would like to bring a more business-like mindset to the district court. And that's really why I'm running for judge. To kind of, I'm sort of like, if you complain about it long enough, then go do something about it. And that's sort of kind of what I'm doing, to say, well, I'm going to try to go do something about it. So that's really one of the reasons I'd like to be a judge.
Okay. So as a judge and as a lawyer, what does equality under the law mean to you?
Equality under the law means, as a judge, I don't make the law. That's the legislature's job. It needs to be applied equally to black, white, rich, poor, buddy, nobody. It really doesn't matter. And so you need to apply that whether you particularly like the outcome or not. To me, we're judges. We don't like how the laws apply, but you still have to apply the law equally to everybody. And the problem is, when you don't, and you sort of exercise a lot of judicial discretion, you're going to leave one group feeling like they're mistreated or not being, dealt with fairly. And so you got to be consistent. And the law is a law. Luckily, as a district court judge, is really hard and fast rules. At least there should be, and you got to follow it. That's part of being a judge. If you can't sit up there and take your emotions out of it, you shouldn't be in the job. You shouldn't.
So how does that apply to landlord-tenant cases?
Well, I mean, just like anything else, I mean, in landlord-tenant cases, if there's certain court rules, we follow them. If people don't abide by them, then whatever that court rule says needs to happen. Like I said, the legislature is there. They gave us a set of rules to follow. We have to apply those. And if we don't like it, it's not my job, whether I like it or not. If I don't like it or we think it needs to change, that's not my job. That's the legislature's job. So it needs to be applied fairly to every single person, whether it be landlord, tenant, or anything else.
All right. What is your current experience with landlord-tenant law?
Well, I will tell you, primarily my practice is dealt with mostly criminal law and family law. I've done that for over 10 years. I've had a little bit of landlord tenant and all. I mean, I certainly know enough to do it. I will tell you, it's not. I like trial law. I like the back and forth in the courtroom. You don't get a lot of that in landlord tenant. I've done a few civil cases, but I mean, I'll be upfront with it. I've probably dealt with, over 10 years, maybe a total of 10 landlord tenant cases. But I will tell you, I'm in district court. Well, of course, when we're open, I'm in district court every single day. I know these judges. I know the staff. I know the people to talk to, the people that are, I don't want to call them players in the system, but people that can get things done. In trial law, they say it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And, one of the things, I think all these candidates, I think we're all smart enough to do landlord tenant law. I mean, I think we're all experienced enough to do that, or at least, to reach out to people to learn how to do that. The question is, what's your, what do you want to do with it? I mean, are you going to look at making it better, making it worse? Are you going to listen to people who are in front of you? That's really the biggest thing for me. So I don't do it a lot. I really don't do a lot of landlord tenant. I'm aware of the issues with landlord tenant law. I got to be honest with you, I almost thought I thought about being a landlord and buying rentals, but I've heard a lot of horror stories being a landlord, and I don't need that stress with a family and a full-time practice.
So that kind of segues to the next one. What is the eviction process, or what is your understanding of the eviction process?
Well, my understanding is, obviously there's two different ways to do it. Just like there's either you have a written lease or you don't. There's either a 7-day or a 30-day notice. Depending, 7-day obviously is for non-payment of rent. 30 days is for, my understanding is, it's for either no lease agreement, which we run into a lot during custody stuff, because somebody gets kicked out and they realize that their girlfriend's actually a tenant because she's been staying there long enough. There's different things. So you file one of the 7 days or 30 days after the expiration of that. You can file a summons and complaint. My understanding is, I don't personally know this, my understanding is that they try to get a hearing within 10 days, and it's more of a summary judgment kind of proceeding. And basically, I think it's the opportunity for the tenant to come in and, I guess, claim any defenses they have, or potentially they paid rent or whatever it is. My understanding is that's a kind of like a settlement conference. That's a way to see if the parties can come to some agreement, whether it be a money judgment or agreement to get out. And then if they want a trial, they can have a trial, which, again, my understanding is that that's done relatively quickly. And then obviously, just like anything else, it's set for a trial. And potentially, I mean, the tenant, has to prove if they paid rent or not, and the landlord has to show whether or not they receive. And just like every evidentiary proceeding, then they have to prove that. So that's my understanding, basically, of a little bit of the landlord-tenant process.
Okay. Now, recently, many tenants have been filing motions that do not comply with the Michigan court rules, including timeframes to file those motions. Some judges have allowed those motions to go to hearings, at which time the landlord always wins because it's a violation of the MCR to have filed that motion in the first place. This effectively gives the tenants an additional free month of rent for abusing the legal system. What do you think should be done about this?
Well, I've sort of dealt with this in my practice in family law. We'll have recommendations that are issued from a friend of the court, or somebody misses their deadline to file, and unfortunately, they file an objection, and we call up to the court and say, well, wait a minute, it says clearly in the court rule that you got this amount of time, and if not, they can't file an objection. Of course, and the hearing still goes forward, and that costs clients additional money. So in the same way, if somebody files a motion that doesn't comply with the court rules, one, just for judicial economy, I mean, we shouldn't be hearing motions that aren't filed pursuant to the court rule. And two, in the matter of fairness of the parties, everybody's got to operate on the same set of rules, and those are the Michigan court rules. And so if somebody misses a deadline, or they're not complying with a court rule and file a motion, I don't see why a judge can't exercise judicial discretion and dismiss that. And I think it's really unfair to someone who is following the rules to be penalized for that. But like I said, the court rules apply equally. If someone doesn't follow them, there can't be flexibility there, because the minute you start giving somebody flexibility, somebody is being dealt with unfairly. You have to be, unfortunately, rigid. Again, if you don't like the court rules, then talk to the legislature. Talk to them, have them do it, but you got to follow these rules. So that's my opinion on that. Like I said, I had the same frustration with a lot of the family court judges, and the same thing. We end up in court, and they violate the court rule, and eventually gets dismissed, but it costs more money for everybody. So it's frustrating.
So another area that's sort of similar is that late fees are a common practice in both businesses and government providers in order to recoup the cost of collecting past due bills. They are legal in the state of Michigan, and every neighboring court allows them in landlord-tenant laws. There have been judges in the past who remove them from any judgments during an eviction hearing. Do you think this is an appropriate application of the law, and how would you handle late fees?
Well, I'm a firm believer in the freedom of contract, and that is basically, you can make any contract you want. It doesn't matter if we think it's good or bad, or it's particularly dumb. But if there's late fees in a contract and you paid late and you sign that knowing what the terms are, I don't have any problem as a judge assessing those. I mean, again, everybody got into this, with a clear mind in terms of the contract, and absent a showing of duress or coercion or one of the other recognized one of the recognized defenses to a contract, if you signed it, it's one of those things. You signed it, and you agreed to be responsible for late fees, and you got to pay them.
All right, those are our standard questions. I'm going to open up to the board. We've got a couple other ones we've been batting around that we've got for you, and then if you've got a question for us or whatever, just let us know.
Great, thank you.
Should I ask that judicial temperament one that we've been asking everybody?
Yes, we love that one.
Okay. Well, David, when he was on, he of course used better words than I did, but where do you think, Matt, that you would line up regarding judicial temperament in the judges that we have now?
I will tell you, I think in terms of temperament, probably more of Judge Nolan. And the reason I say that is Judge Nolan, I mean, at least in my opinion, has less of the pomp and circumstance of being a judge. It's really like, okay, it's like a business attitude, which is not shocking because he was in private practice. He had a pretty decent private practice. And, you know, when you do this day to day, you're used to solving difficult problems quickly or else you don't make any money. So for him, he seems relaxed, which I like. I believe I'd be a relaxed judge. But also is, you know, how do we solve a problem? How do we get to a resolution in an efficient manner without maybe going every single solid step to that, you know, to that solution? So, I mean, I also know he's very good at, you know, sitting in the back and listening to both sides and saying, okay, how do we come to resolution? And doesn't stand in the way of people coming with a fair resolution. So my understanding in landlord tenant is I think when he does these summary judgment proceedings is that he can ask more questions to both the tenant and the landlord to kind of get to the heart of the matter and not really have a trial, but maybe instead of just saying, okay, well, you know, let's set this for trial, you know, can we get to a little more to the bottom of maybe what's the underlying issue? You know, do you really have an issue? And kind of hold more people, you know, feet to the fire in terms of that regard. So, you know, I think I would like to, I think I would be more like him. I also, you guys know, maybe go in front of him, Judge Marietti up in circuit court, very well-reasoned guy, always has the law, even if you don't like his decision, always has a law to show why he made that decision, whether you agree with it or not. That's the kind of judge I want to be. I want to have a judge that has a reputation of, okay, we didn't maybe like what he did, but man, when he came out, he said exactly what he's doing, why he's doing it. It's backed up by law. So that's the kind of demeanor and reputation I like to have as a judge.
Good answer. That's such an awkward pause right there. I'm never sure what I'm supposed to do. 2 thumbs up. Whoa, what is that noise?
I got a motorcycle. I'm on Apple Avenue, so I got a motorcycle flying by here.
Oh, gotcha.
Look on your website, Matt, under your attorney profile, that Matt is a different attorney than one is accustomed to. How are you different from the other 3 running for judge?
I will say this. I remember writing that, and what I mean by that is this. When I got into private practice, I was working for Terry Nolan, and Terry, for all his faults, he always treated somebody like they were an equal. There's too many lawyers, in my opinion, that, you know, we have this prestigious job. We're this lawyer. Oh, we're a lawyer, you know. And I've always said, being a lawyer is no different than being a plumber. We just have a different skill set, you know. And so what I mean by that is I want to be approachable. I don't want someone to come in here feeling nervous, like, oh my God, it's a lawyer. I'm so nervous. And I want to be more like, look, you know, let's solve this problem together. People are people. It really doesn't matter if, you know, if they've committed crimes or they got issues. They're still people. And you can learn a lot from talking to people. I mean, every person has their own background story. Every person has why they're here, you know, especially with criminal stuff. You know, people do bad things, but not all of them are bad people. In fact, most of them are very, very good people. And so I just know that dealing with a lot of other, you know, people that come from other lawyers, there's that attitude of, you know, non-approachability with lawyers. And really the same thing with judges too. You know, I mean, these are people too. So, you know.
Yeah, approachable judge.
Well, yeah, I mean, and what's wrong with that too? You know, and the thing is, people, well, you know, you got to be neutral. Okay, that's fine. You can be neutral as a judge. Nobody says if you say hi to people or maybe go talk to people that you're not neutral. I mean, these are the people who elected you. This is basically your boss. And it's like, I don't understand why that isn't a thing. I just don't get it. And so it's frustrating to me that there's that wall. But in terms of approachability, that's what I meant when I wrote that on the website is I'm not an arrogant, stonewall, uptight, got a big old ego kind of attorney. I really am a guy who wants to be approachable, who people, if they see me in the grocery store, can come up to me and say, "Hey, how you doing?" and actually have a conversation. So that's I think out of all of us, I think I have that. And like I said, I would love to be that kind of judge. Not, oh my God, it's a judge, I got to be okay. No, I'm a person. I'm a regular person. So
That answers the question. Thank you.
I know I've tried to describe this to everyone. The Muskegon Area Rental Association, we really do try and educate our members and try and be professional. We know there are slumlords out there that don't follow the rules, but due to previous bad actors and judicial temperament of past judges, we have seen that the judges tend to use landlord-tenant laws as a time to fix a person's personal life instead of applying the law, which makes it very difficult for landlords to actually run this like a business. It becomes a fight, and we don't want that to happen. So is there anything else you can say that about your, I mean, anything you can say to touch on that about your ability to apply the law equally between two different parties, which one, we're almost always represented or are very aware of the rules, versus two, the tenant who is usually representing themselves?
well, I think just like any judge, I think that a lawyer and a judge, a lawyer and someone who's not represented. I mean, when it comes down to it, I've been in hearings where, and I won't say who is, which judges, but it feels like almost like the judge becomes a lawyer for the unrepresented person. And it's frustrating because I think the judge needs to stick to a role of being the mediator and applying the law. They're the person that hears objections. They're the person that makes rulings on those objections. They're the person that applies the law to the set of facts. They are not supposed to advocate for either side. And I think sometimes in a lot of hearings I have, they've almost become an advocate for somebody unrepresented because they feel bad that they're unrepresented. And, like I mentioned, Judge Marietti and some of these other judges, they say, look, you are going to be taken as a lawyer because if you choose to represent yourself, it's your choice. You have that freedom. So I understand that, there's a history to everyone, but I think that if you somehow say, well, because this landlord is a business owner or, they own these houses or they have, you assume they have all this money that, well, they can just kind of take the hit. Well, let me tell you something. I've been in private practice and I've gotten that attitude too, where people don't pay their bills. And they always come in and they say basically, well, you can afford it, you're a lawyer, whatever. Here's the thing, I'm a businessman. I got bills to pay. I got insurance to pay for. I got employees to pay for. I got liability insurance. I got all the things that they slap you with as a small business that nobody realizes when they get in this thing that you have. And then to be go in there and to be treated, I'm assuming if the judges treat a landlord like, okay, they're some rich person. No, they're a business person. This is how they make money. And if they work so hard at building this business, I don't think they should be penalized for that. So I get really frustrated sometimes as a business owner too when there's that attitude of, well, you can just take it. Well, I might have the financial resources to take it, but that doesn't mean it's fair. And I'm running a business. It's a business that I work very, very hard for, and I've built up, and I feel like I should be treated fairly. So as far as I'm aware, most of these landlords in town, you guys have built your businesses, and it's not like you just cruise control. It's not like cruise control. You got to work every single day. You got to work. You might get up at 8. You got to leave sometimes at 7:30. You got to deal with an issue in the middle of the night because guess what? You have to. And you know, I think that's the background that I can bring to this job more than anybody else. I am not about talking down on my opponents, but I believe that I have a little more understanding of what it takes to run a business, of how hard it is. I know Mark worked for the prosecutor's office for a very long time. You kind of get in that 9 to 5 attitude or 9 to 4 attitude. He's got one client now, the FOP, which is fine. I'm glad he's representing. He's a great attorney. But you sort of get used to that 9 to 5. Paula, works for the public defender's office. It's a 9 to 5 thing. Jason, I don't know too much about Jason, but I know he doesn't have a very busy private practice, at least based on what I can tell from the court schedule. The mentality I have is I do this every day. I mean, yesterday I was at my office till 4:30 at night. Why? Because I have to get client stuff done because I'm balancing this campaign stuff with the client stuff. It has to be done. And so when you get used to that mentality, I think you can at least have more sympathy for other business people. And that's what you guys are. You're running a business. So I don't think it's fair that the law is applied differently because there's some perception of we're all these rich people and we make all this money and all that. I mean, if we make money, it's a product of our work, and that shouldn't be a negative against us. That's my viewpoint.
We should also add that when you say you were at the office till 4:30, that yesterday was Sunday. It wasn't a weekday.
Oh yeah, well, is what it is.
If it was a weekday, then you would have been clocking out early.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of this is our time to preach our grievances a little bit. We just want to be treated fairly. If the landlord's doing something wrong, we want the landlord to get in trouble. And because it's a bad name, it makes us look bad as an organization if landlords aren't doing their job. But same thing on the tenant side, because there's a lot of games that have been played, including, and you filed for a writ, so you've gone through everything. We would rather have the tenant stay and pay. We don't want to evict. It's the worst thing that can happen to a landlord's property. It guarantees you're going to lose money that year. You want them to stay, but it gets to that point where you have to evict. You're now a month, 2 months without getting paid, and you file a writ. You've already gotten everything done, and the judges let it sit on their table. I don't know what a judge's schedule is like, but I know that in my office, I have people that will bring me a stack of papers that need to be signed, and it takes all of 5 minutes to do.
Yeah.
We would appreciate if we have followed all the rules, that the court will also, I mean, we don't need you to stay there till 5:30 or 4:30 at night, but if you could just sign the documents.
Well, but see, my whole thing is this, though. I mean, if it takes staying till 5:30 to do a job, okay, whether it be this in private practice for me or as a judge, I'm going to get it done because it needs to be done. Because in private practice, you got a client calling you and they say, well, why didn't you get it done? I wanted to go home. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. Now, does that always mean I got a happy wife when I come home? No, it's not. Is there sacrifices I make? No. Yes. But if you're not willing, if you take on the client, you prepare to do the work. And so I don't say like, hey, look, I'm going to stay till 6, 7:30 every night at this courthouse. No, I'm saying if there's something that needs to be done, it's got to get done. And that's what's frustrating for me. I mean, in district court, the one thing that just drives me nuts is nothing starts on time. I don't understand that. Like, I go to a job, I get here at 8 and I leave later. I don't understand why a judge doesn't get here at 8 and doesn't stay till 5. I mean, in no job in the world, in the private economy, would you survive? You get fired. They'd say, what the hell am I paying for? So that's the frustrating thing to me is, I mean, all you got to do, I mean, the one thing you can do, it's like my mom always said, the one thing you can do for a job that impresses everybody, because God, people don't do it too much, is be on time or be early. It really impresses people. I don't understand why we can't have that temper. I don't understand the 9 to 4 o'clock thing. I just don't get it. So to me, my mindset as a judge is I'm going to be there at 8. I'm going to leave once things are done for that day, and we're going to get it done. And we're going to get it done as efficiently as possible. And if thing needs to be changed, we're going to change it, or at least try as hard as we possibly can to do that. There are efficient ways to run things, and we're going to do that. And we're going to fight like hell to do it, to try. And so that's really my mindset. It's not because I want to stay late. My understanding with the writs, the other thing my understanding is they get signed after, you can do a writ. I don't know why there's not some kind of court rule or something that says they have to sign it within 48 hours. I just don't, when I heard that, I was a little shocked by that. I said, how is it even possible? So if a judge wants to let us sit on a desk for 2 weeks, they can. I mean, to me, that's a real miss by the legislature. I don't get that. So in a way, that might be something that needs to be a remedy, because that's insane to me. So.
Well, thanks, Matt. I think we're done with the half hour, right, Gary?
Yep. We appreciate your time. We believe the process is the group of 4 is going to get whittled down to a group of 2, and then we'll try and get the final 2 back. So hopefully we'll be talking to you soon.
Hey, I did have a question for you guys. Yeah. I see it from the criminal side in terms of what I think could be made more efficient in terms of the criminal aspect of retrials. But I don't really see too much, obviously, from the civil or landlord-tenant side. Is there anything that you guys could think could be changed in terms of scheduling, in terms of, dates or times or something that would make this system over here more efficient?
Personally, I run a property management company, so we have about 800 units under management. So we're in court all the time.
Yeah.
Biggest issues are timeliness.
Okay.
I mean, courts, the court cases take weeks to get scheduled, which if there's too much work, that's fine. I understand. But I mean, timeliness, and then the writs of eviction just sitting on desks for a week, 2 weeks. If we could just get the time sped up, it would make everything go easier on our side. And then the other stuff is a little bit hard to describe. Like I said, it's the judicial discretion of how they want to apply it. And that's per judge. There's nothing really wrong with that. Now, there is a program called the Eviction Prevention Program, which is basically putting all the social services in the courthouse at the same time as the eviction court. It's not good or bad, but because there's not enough of those dates where you could file timely, I don't think you guys have gotten as much participation as you'd like to see. But that's because no one's going to wait an entire month to file, and there's a bunch. Yeah. So
I think a fair thing to say at this point would be that when we have the top 2 candidates come back, we'll be ready. How do they say that? Locked and loaded. We'll be ready with all those questions and all those concerns at that point. And at that point, we'll also have hopefully, because people will want to, be in a social setting again, we'll have a full membership and people there to ask questions and to voice their concerns.
Yeah, it looks like Jason's here now. So we'll let you go. We do appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
My hand's getting tired.
All right. Looks like he's joining.
Is he there?
Jason, are you on?
Maybe he doesn't have his microphone
I see him, but he's muted.
Oh.
Bottom left-hand side, there should be a red microphone button. All right. Doesn't look like he's muted anymore. Can you hear us now, Jason? No. No, still muted and he's gone.
Uh-oh.
I think he's gonna.
There we go.
He's back, but muted. Let's see if I can.
How about that?
Now
there
we
we
can
go.
hear you.
All right. Took some time. How's
Hi,
it going?
Pretty
How
good.
are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. How about
All right,
yourself?
so we've got 7 questions that we've been asking everyone. We'll
Okay.
run through those. You can take 2 or 3 minutes, expound on them as much as you want. Talk about your philosophy, why you want to be a judge and whatnot. And then once that's done, we'll open up to a Q&A where you can ask us questions and we can ask you questions. It's kind of a little bit more ad lib.
Okay.
So for the first question, the big one, why do you want to be a judge?
It's something that's right up my alley in terms of the experience, the pretty based experience, it's all a matter of being a part of the community, making an impact as much as I can before my values go extinct. That's about it.
Okay. So as a judge and as a lawyer, what does equality under the law mean to you?
Equality or equity?
Equality.
Okay, I mean that we treat everybody the same, at least in terms of. See, my understanding of the word was equity, but equality under the law would mean that you're subject to the Equal Protection Clause and things of that nature, as opposed to equity. I think equity more relates to landlord-tenant law.
So explain. So then, talk to us a little bit about equity under the law.
Basically, it's there's certain relief when relief isn't available at law. Things like injunctive relief, declaratory matters. If there's an adequate remedy at law, you proceed with that claim. I guess this all ties into some sort of division between chancery and courts of law back in the old times, back in medieval England. And they've generally been merged, but we still keep the principles separate because there's no right to a jury, for example, in equity cases. It's things like an injunction or declaratory relief.
Okay. Now, as far as equality under the law, how does that apply to landlord-tenant law?
The only thing I can really say about that is the discrimination provisions, the only thing that are really applicable in terms of equal protection or equality under the law. It's pretty hard to achieve total equality here because nobody lives in the same place. Nobody lives in, some people live in nice homes and other people live in ghettos. I don't think that we're ever trying to achieve equality in the law. Rent is dictated by the market. That's about it.
Okay.
So, I don't know if, I don't really look at outside of discrimination, for example, discriminating against blacks for housing or discrimination based on obesity or, whatever the situation. I think that's what we have, certain statutes there to protecting us from equality or just striving to, at least prevent discrimination.
All right. Which brings us to, you mentioned landlord-tenant law. What experience have you personally had dealing in landlord-tenant law?
Well, I have 23 years as a civil attorney. My first 3 years, I graduated in 96, took the bar, passed it. By November, I was working for Dave Bowen in Muskegon. Obviously, he does landlord-tenant, among other things. We were doing, master deeds and for condo developments, construction liens, things like that. But obviously, real estate and landlord-tenant issues were always a big one for Dave Bowen during that period of time. For another 13 years after working for Dave, I went to Lansing and I did municipal defense work. So there wasn't much of that, but outside of the fact that my father has a lot of rentals, and one of the building is low income, and he constantly has problems with tenants. Now a good chunk of them get in on some program. I think it's out of Bethany Christian or it's right there on Tears and or more like Peck. But he has to evict people all the time, and so I've tried cases for him. But outside of that, I mean, I'm a general practice attorney, and real estate has always been like something that I've always done. From the time of working for Bowen to the time that I've been in Lansing, real estate has always been under my radar. In Lansing, it was more like zoning, takings without just compensation. But so I didn't do much of it outside of my dad's stuff. And then once I became a general practice attorney when I moved back to Muskegon from Lansing, again, I continued to do real estate law, and landlord tenant is one of the needs of the average consumer. So I've tried a case in front of every one of those judges that are out there right now. Everyone close, Nolan, Lattice Hoops, and Castrava. I just did a bed bugs case last December in front of Castrava, and I mean, I didn't think that he would. Sometimes periodically I represent the tenant, and in that case it was a pro bono matter. She was getting evicted for bed bugs, and she was living in this Jefferson Suites or something like that, the high rise over on Jefferson and Terrace, I think it is. But I just tried that case last December, and he ruled against us. But
so
mainly I represent landlords. Mainly I've represented landlords.
Okay, so it sounds like you've got experience. Could you describe to us the eviction process?
Starts with a notice. A 30-day notice or a 7-day notice. I guess it could be a 3-day notice, depending upon if it's an emergency. There's different, there's a statute, the summary proceeding statute, and different bases for evicting somebody, and that kicks in the notice requirement. You wait out the notice requirement, file the complaint, wait for the hearing, go to the hearing, see what the issues are. I think you get 10 days from, I'm pretty sure it's 10 days from the time of the hearing until the time that they have to go. It all depends on whether it's a pay to stay situation or whether you're just trying to get rid of them because they're outside of the lease. Or an emergency, I guess. Drugs in the house, using crack, meth houses, things like that.
Okay. So recently, many tenants have been filing motions that do not comply with Michigan court rules, including timeframes to file. Some judges have allowed these motions to go to hearings, at which time the landlord always wins due to these violations of the MCR. This effectively gives free rent to tenants abusing the legal system. What do you feel should be done about this?
Well, I mean, every judge needs to manage his docket pretty tightly, I guess, to make sure that there's no, everything's running smoothly. Some of these concerns relate to, I guess, due process issues, and due process is expensive. You got to give them some opportunity to be heard. Now, are they frivolous motions? I guess I didn't understand the full question. They're filing motions to do what exactly?
So, as an example, after you've gone through the eviction process and you have a writ, and then you filed and gotten the signed writ, people will then file a motion to stay, which is now past the 10. You're supposed to file that 10 days after the judgment. They're filing it 15, 20, 25 days later. They're filing a motion to stay. And
they're outside the court rules.
Right. So it's 100% outside of the court rules, but there are judges that are letting it go to a hearing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, in large part, this relates to how you treat in pro per people, as opposed to, somebody proceeding with an attorney. I think attorneys are expected to know the rules. Yeah, I mean, some improper people, they, you know, I wouldn't say they rely on their ignorance, but yeah, there are a lot of judges that would allow some of that. I guess it's going to depend upon the circumstances, but I would intend to run things. There's no point in having bog downs or somebody outside of the compliant, you know, the regular time periods without a very good reason. You know, good cause. I don't know what that would be. And certainly messing with my trial dates would be something, you know, I've always respected trial dates. Judges set them. I try not to have the client even, you know, move them. I always don't want to be the one to do that. And, you know, if you just stick to the date, you know, things happen where you can just work things out, but you got to hold their feet to the fire. So I think that, you know, dates are incredibly important in terms of them filing motions. Yeah, I mean, you know, if something's that outside of the court rules, and we're talking outside of an appeal too, right? I mean, they have a right to appeal within that 10 days. They can go up to another, you know, court, higher court, but that does not sound appropriate. Is that
Okay.
what's going on in Muskegon now?
Yes, it is.
Hmm.
Also, there are late fees are a common practice in business contracts as well as from governments in order to recoup costs of collecting past due bills. They are legal in the state of Michigan, and every neighboring court allows them in landlord-tenant law. There have been judges in Muskegon in the past who remove late fees from any judgments during an eviction hearing. Do you think this is an appropriate application of the law? And how do you plan on handling late fees?
You know, I didn't know that was a universal rule, frankly. I don't know if other counties, I mean, you're saying that to be true, that other counties are, they allow late fees in a landlord-tenant matter as opposed to a land contract forfeiture?
Yeah,
I think that,
in both Ottawa and Kent County, late fees are allowed, and they're allowed by Michigan law and contract law. So,
yeah. And if there is a contract provision, it sounds like it's something that can be implemented. I don't see why contract principles wouldn't be applicable here. I mean, it's after all, it's a lease's contract. And if that contains a provision for late fees, yeah, that could be within the. I'm unaware of any statute which precludes it, and I've certainly made the argument many times that our late fees should be included. And I remember Judge Close saying no. A few other judges, Lattice Hoops. I don't know about Nolan, but then I've also had cases in the land contract setting in front of some of those same judges, and I've gotten away with the late fees. I don't know what really makes the difference there, but if you can enforce it in a land contract setting, why not a landlord tenant? Because it's just a different type of property interest.
Yep. So that's the end of our standard 7 questions. So I'm now going to open up to the rest of the board. They're going to ask you any questions they have, and then you can ask us any questions you'd like as well.
All right.
Should I ask my normal one that I've been asking?
Yeah.
Okay, David started it, but then he had to go to physical therapy. So his question is it regarding judicial temperament and the 4 judges that we have, where do you kind of land?
Judicial temperament, I would say I would land closer to Jeff Nolan. Yeah. I mean, you know, I get along with people pretty good. I mean, I'm a people person. I mean, certainly they do things that, I mean, you know, people do wild things. Let's get real. I mean, but you know, I certainly there aren't too many judges on the district court level that I think are, you know, I think they're all pretty kosher. And I've gone upstairs, and some of the judges there are not. They're, in terms of temperament, you know, some of them are downright rude. There's one in particular I'm not going to mention who, but you know, I think that I can't imagine myself flipping out from the bench, frankly. But I've been in those situations. I mean, you know, judges that just want to dominate the questioning. They want you to answer their question, you know, yes or no. And Yeah, I mean, I think that you just got to let it play out, things play out, and certainly let people make their arguments and be fair.
Good answer. Anybody else have a question? Oh, did they all leave?
No, everyone's just muted.
Okay.
Wait, Gary, did you ask the question about the regarding the writs?
Yes, I did. I did mention the writs. Our big issue, Muskegon, the Muskegon Area Rental Association is a group of landlords tries very hard to maintain our professionalism. We understand that there have been bad actors in the past, slumlords who've abused the system. But because of the judicial temperament that have been on the bench and the bad actors in the past, we feel that the landlord-tenant laws have not been, the landlords have not been treated fairly under the law. We're not asking for special treatment. We're not asking to not have to follow the rules. But if we're required to follow the rules and the deadlines and the time frames, we're wanting judges who will also hold the tenants to the same standard that we're at, which is just follow the rules of both the contract and the Michigan court rules. So could you speak any more about how you would treat landlords and tenants in an equal fashion?
Well, I mean, they're inherently unequal. They're just not the same. One is a lord, and the other one is subservient. I mean, one owns the property, and the other one just has the rights to use the property. I mean.
I think we lost him.
I wasn't sure if that was me or if it was our.
His name is still up.
Yeah, his name's still up, but.
Says he left.
All right. So I think that's it then.
Okay, good job, guys.
Any initial opinions? I know most of the board's gone.
Where will the link be posted so people can watch it?
As soon as it takes a day or so to compile and be saved in my screen, I will then be able to put it onto YouTube, and then we can put it on. We can send an email out, and
because I'd like to send an email to the the 4 candidates as well.
Perfect. I can cut this part out.
Good idea.
So feel free to I'll actually go ahead and stop recording.